Collagraph prints. Take, I don't know what. Action. I'm out of practice with this device.
I know you are. Is this thing on?
Take
At
9.
that point?
Okay.
This was kind of interesting because we started going in one direction and then at one point we're like, nope, and then we went in a completely different one. Well, not completely different, but certainly we had diverged from where we thought we were going.
Yeah, it was a little bit more complex. It became more complex because I started thinking about what if we combined all these things? Like we had a whole bunch of separate things, and I was like, what if we combine them? So we're making collagraph prints, or collagraph plates basically to print on the gel plate. So here's what I made. And it's not much to look at like this, but it offers a lot of raised texture that are a combination of stencil patterns that became a unique and interesting pattern all combined.
One of the things that we didn't set out to do, but that you realized as we were going along, was by cutting up your original plates that you created with molding paste, you were able to combine stencil designs in a way that you can't any other way,
right.
Which is the best part, I think.
That was the best part of this, was putting together multiple stencil design patterns all into one 9x12. And one thing that we didn't talk about in the video is that these, I made them with molding paste on cardstock, and so once they get all painty, you can actually cut them apart and put them in your mixed media artwork.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't talk about that.
Because they're paper. And after a while, you get paint and all kinds of beautiful things happening on them. And then you can cut them up and add them into your artwork, glue them down. Because these are all glued down with gel medium onto this 9x12 cardstock. So they glue nice.
Right. So here's an example. You can see that it gets all pretty and colorful. And if you decide that you're done using this for the purpose of creating texture on a gel print, then you cut this up and do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, that would be really neat in the background.
It's really cool.
So yeah, so the fact that we created them on paper allows them to be glued into mixed media artwork, which is kind of neat.
Absolutely. We're always looking for different kinds of things, and this certainly provides that. It provides color and texture and dimension, most of all.
Yeah, definitely.
So
want to go do it?
Yeah, let's go do it.
Okay.
All right. When we decided to attempt this technique using the plates, whether you think of it as a texture plate or a collagraph plate, and Elizabeth is going to talk in depth about that, we came at this from two different places. So she started with, and this has been hacked up a little bit, and she'll explain that too. She started with a full 9x12 rendition of a stencil. This one happens to be Planet Peacock. I came at it from a little bit different perspective. I wanted to use some that were smaller. So this is Racing Spots, this is Klimt Leaves, and this is C-Shapes from one of the Patterns for Layering releases. And what I discovered, this is the first one, this is actually quite smooth. I was pretty deliberate when I applied the texture paste because I thought it needed to be really smooth. And then I wanted to try it a little bit thicker, and so I made this one with C-Shapes. And you can see that this is not flat. The ridge here that you see that's just turquoise and then there's color down in, it's because, and I'm going to show you how to do this, it's because I applied the texture paste really thickly and then I lifted the stencil up so that it created these high areas, and that's really critical to getting all of the various parts of this, which I don't have one here to show you, but you can definitely see these lines when you print with it. When you look at this, these lines, that outline, if you will, is caused by the ridge on the texture plate. And then this just happens to be another print that I did. It's obviously multiple layers. But to get that, you need these ridges. And to get these ridges, you gotta apply the texture paste really thickly. So that's what I'm gonna show you. I'm coming back to her Klimt Leaves. I have one of our number 10 panel cards, and I have Ranger's opaque texture paste. Now at first this is going to look like I'm using a whole buttload, and you kind of are, but keep in mind that what sits on top of this stencil, and I'll show you this, I'm going to scrape this off and put it back in the jar. So I'm going to start with this big old blob that's here, and I'm going to spread this quite thickly. And this is just like putting butter on your pancakes or frosting a cake. It's thick. The consistency of this texture paste is very much like frosting. So you're going to treat it pretty much the same way. And you'll notice how thick this is. I mean, if I poke this in here, you can see how thick that is. And that's really what I'm trying to get, is that thickness, because that's what's going to give me those raised edges when I pick this stencil up. Okay, now I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's important that I get it on thickly, because otherwise we're not going to get what we're looking for. All right, so if I pick this up now, there you go. See those ridges? See how high they stand up? Now some of them are going to get lost. You're going to press or whatever, and you might push some of them down, but it's those ridges, those outlines of the shape that are going to give you those lines that I showed you a moment ago. Now, as I said, there's a whole lot of texture paste, excuse me, left on this stencil. So I'm going to come through and I'm going to scrape it off. And you can see I'm going to put a lot back in this jar. And then not only will I scrape it here, and it doesn't matter that I'm kind of contaminating the texture paste. This is a jar that I've earmarked for this kind of stuff, where it doesn't matter what color or if there's chips of this or that in the texture paste, because for this purpose, it really is irrelevant. I'm going to pick as much of this up as possible so that there's very little waste. And then, as always, you'll want to clean your tools and your stencil, because when this stuff dries, it's going to dry really, really hard. But that's all you have to do to make these happen.
So we've been playing around with the idea of molding paste through the stencil like Barb showed you previously. And then I got to thinking about collagraph plates, and collagraph plates are plates where you put you collage different heights of elements onto one piece, and then you pull a print from that. So colla is the Greek word for glue, and graph is for drawing. I don't know if it's also Greek, but it means drawing. So it's like glue, colla, graph, print. So you're basically collaging and then making a print, which is right up my alley, right?
Betcha.
So I started out with 9x12 cardstock full molding paste of my stencil patterns. I did some on the cardstock. I did some on Mylar, the sheet that came with a brand new gel plate, to see how that would work. And I did small dense patterns, and I did wide far apart. This is from the Patterns for Layering. I think it's called Argyle. This one is called Mesh Mask. This one I think is called Nouveau. It's from the Art Nouveau series. And then this one is the Peacock, Planet Peacock. And this is also on plastic. So I was using them as 9x12, and then I started going down the rabbit hole of looking at Collagraph, because I remembered it from art school. And then you can see that I cut these apart. So I thought, rather than just printing the full 9x12, if I cut them apart and made a Collagraph plate. So it's on another 9x12 sheet of cardstock, because I'm working on a 9x12 gel plate and I'm printing on 9x12 paper. So I made it 9x12, and I took pieces and parts of all of those previous molding paste prints that I just showed you, and I glued them all together. So now I have the benefit of the patterns from multiple stencils with molding paste on one 9x12 sheet. So I gel printed, and I just wanted to show you. So the first print that I was really excited about was this one from the Collagraph plate. You can see that some of the molding pastes are higher and some are lower, resulting in some areas that are lighter and some that are darker, and varying degrees of heights of texture. And that's what made it really cool. Now, the thing that I can never reproduce is the dark areas that ended up around here are artifacts, leftover paint from previous prints. So, you can never, that's the beauty and the serendipity of the gel plate. So all that dark around the edges was from a navy blue print that I had made previously. So then I pulled the ghost print of that with a little bit of pale yellow, and I got a nice subtle version. So I got like a more bold, contrasty version, and then a more subtle version with the ghost print. And then I created this one with the Collagraph print. So my base layer was teal blue, and I did purple over the top. So I'm working on my Yasutomo 9x12 sketch rice paper pad and the 9x12 plate. and my 9x12 Collagraph plate. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try to reproduce this one for you. We're not gonna get the dark blue, but I'll at least show you how I did it. So I started out with a really light pink on the base layer. We, Barb and I, through our experimenting, figured out that the higher contrast between the Collagraph print and the background shows it off better. So I'm going with a very light background. So this nice light pink. And I'm gonna take my rice paper with the smooth side, and that smooth side is gonna go down into the plate, and that is because it pulls off more paint than the rough side because the smooth surface. So we should get all the paint off, or most of it. And we have this nice light pink base layer. So then I'm gonna use quinacridone magenta or permanent red violet, something similar. And this is a lot darker, right? So we'll roll this dark color out, and we should get a nice contrast between this and the base layer. And you want to have kind of a little bit of a thick layer because we're going to be pressing and removing paint with the Collagraph plate. So we got to have a little bit of thickness of paint. Now there's varying highs and lows in this. So I found the best way is to apply the pressure with your hands so that you can press in the lower areas and feel it. You can really feel the highs and lows, and you can apply the pressure appropriately and try to get good contact with all of the pieces and parts of the Collagraph plate into the paint. And what this is doing is it's removing some of the paint, most of the paint, but not all of it. That's why it's different than a stencil, because we're pressing and removing, but we're not removing all of the paint. We're just removing some of it or most of it. So you get a more subtle print. So I'm gonna come back in with my light pink paper and put that over. And
I knew that was there somewhere.
use my Baron so I can get nice even pressure. And I'll wait a minute. When you pull up multiple layers, if you give it a couple seconds, you have better results. And I always pull a corner to see. I think that looks pretty good.
That looks really good.
So, look at that.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Really cool, right? Yeah. So, there you have like what I love about it is instead of just being one stencil pattern, I've incorporated many of my stencil patterns, and you get some areas that are very crisp and clear, and then you get some areas that are more painterly and soft, and that's because the highs and low texture. And I love that for collage paper because it gives me a more painterly kind of soft effect. So now I have just a wee bit of this pink left, so it's going to be very subtle like the first one that I showed you. And again, you have to go with contrast. I could do that very light pink again, but I'm going to use this Naples Yellow Deep because that is lighter again. And I want to roll out my brayer and make sure I don't get too much light pink in that. A little bit of light pink in it is okay. So for the pickup print like this, you want to have a nice thin layer of paint. I usually brayer it out so you can see the pattern of the previous layer underneath it, that level of thin. And then again, the smooth side down of the rice paper pad, and some good even pressure with the Baron, and a little bit of patience. Just a little, Barb, not a lot.
Between the two of us, we might have a little, right?
Yeah, we might have a little. Okay. So now, nope, not ready.
Yes.
So what'd you do yesterday?
I'm pretty certain I was with you all day.
All right, here we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Look how pretty that is. That one is actually more vivid than the last one that you did. There was more left on the plate.
There's more left on the plate. Yeah, look at that. Wow.
Very, very pretty.
Very nice. So that is the second print and the first print and the Collagraph plate. And the key to these are the high contrast. So the light underneath and the darker on top. Whatever combination of colors you do, you want to have high contrast so that you can really see the pattern. And this collagraph plate can be used over and over and over again. It's not getting wet. It is mounted to cardstock, but since we're just pressing in the paint and removing it and we're not washing it or cleaning it in any way, you can keep using this for quite a while.
As long as it holds together.
Yep, until you get bored of it and you need a new one.
There you go.
All right.
I'm going to take a moment and just show you how I print with my C-shapes pattern, because this is the one that's got those nice raised edges. So I just have a couple of colors. I like to combine this kind of acidy green with pink. I think it looks cool. And even if there's a little bit of mixing in the middle, it's not that big a deal. And as you know, I love ombres, so that's what I'm going to do. And that might be a little bit too much paint. We'll see. Wouldn't be the first time today I put too much paint out on this plate. That appears to be my gift. Yeah, I'm going to roll a little bit of that off. All right, so my ombre got a little bit chacquard, but that's all right. So now what I'm going to do, this is a 5x7 index card, and so technically it doesn't cover the full 8x10 plate, but that's okay. And I'm pressing pretty hard. The interesting thing that happens, and let me just bring this in to show you. The interesting thing that happens is not only do you press on this raised area, you press on this area too, so you get both parts of that affect the paint, which makes for really cool prints. And one thing that I need to do that I didn't is I got to grab another piece of paper, because it's more effective. See how cool that is? You get those lines. It's going to be more effective to pick the color up a second time if I actually go ahead and kind of wipe some of this off. The paint doesn't pick up as significantly when I'm using a texture plate or a collagraphic plate that has damp paint on it. So this, I found, if you take a moment and do that, it'll be worth your while. Okay, that should be good. Oh, that looks good.
That looks great.
Yeah. And we'll just go ahead and pull this. Now, because this is not a pickup print, there's no patience required. I can just pick it up. Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah, so you can see you've got the rings that form around those shapes because of the raised edges. And you can also see where I've pressed the plate against the, it's less apparent with this because these are so tall, but when you have something that's a lower profile, you also get this. So that's it. I mean, it is this simple to get super creative. If I wanted to, there's just a little bit left on here. I probably would just clean that off, but sometimes, as you saw with Elizabeth, she actually came through and picked that up. So sometimes you get 2 for 1.
So you can wow your friends with your art terminology when you talk about collagraphy and collagraph plates, and you can look it up and learn a little bit more about it, because it's always cool to learn something new. Now that I told you what it is, you can look it up and go down the YouTube Google rabbit hole.
That's right, you certainly can. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
Okay.
All right.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.